All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping into the ring for a huge intellectual clash, one that's been going on for, 40 years now. We're talking Marxism versus postcolonial theory. We're going to break down what this fight is really all about, and more importantly, why it still matters today. Some people have already declared a knockout in this fight, but honestly, the real story is so much more interesting than that. This isn't just some dusty academic squabble. Nope. It's a real battle over what are the best tools we have to fight inequality and injustice in the world right now. All right, so here's the plan. We'll kick things off with the history of the feud, then hear the case for Marxism, followed by the post-colonial counterpunch. After that, we'll look at how the real world kind of crashed the party. Then we'll see where things stand now and wrap up with the one question that really gets to the heart of it all. So this whole rivalry really kicked off back in the 1980s, and ever since, man, it's been this wild mix of brilliant collaboration on one hand and some pretty serious academic brawling on the other. The stakes were incredibly high, and the arguments super sharp. Okay, first things first, let's get our terms straight. So, Marxism. You can think of it like a blueprint for society's engine room, right? It's all about a systemic critique of capitalism, focusing on the material world. We're talking the economy, class struggle. The big idea is that all these parts are connected in one giant system, what they call a totality. And the goal is to have a universal theory that, applies everywhere. And then, on the other side of the ring, you've got post-colonial theory. Now, this isn't some single neat rulebook. Its main goal is to dismantle the legacy of colonialism, and not just the lines on a map, but the stuff in our heads too. It's really skeptical of those big, one-size-fits-all stories of history. Instead, it focuses on how messy and unpredictable things are, that's the contingent part, and how cultures mix and create these new hybrid identities. So this whole debate was kind of simmering for years, right? But then, in 2013, this scholar, Vivek Chibber, basically threw a grenade into the whole conversation. He published a book that pretty much declared the fight was over, and that Marxism had won, hands down. And, well, as you can probably imagine, that did not go over quietly. It brought all these old tensions just roaring back to life. Okay, so let's head over to the Marxist corner. What's their core argument against post-colonial theory? I mean, why was someone like Chibber so confident about declaring victory? When you boil it down, the conflict is often framed as a battle over priorities. Marxists are laser-focused on what you might call the hard stuff, the economy, class struggle, the actual material conditions of your life. And from their point of view, post-colonial theorists get a little lost in the soft stuff, like culture and language, and they lose sight of the real engine driving everything, capitalism. And here's the supposed knockout blow from the Marxist side of things. They argue that by focusing so much on cultural differences, post-colonial theory completely lost its bite. The critics basically said it ended up helping the very system it claimed to be against, neoliberalism, the system that loves to celebrate diversity on the surface, all while the rich just keep getting richer underneath it all. Yeah, and the famous philosopher Slavoj Žižek put it, pretty bluntly. He said, post-colonial theory turns a real fight against exploitation into something like a group therapy session. From his perspective, it becomes all about talking through trauma instead of, actually overthrowing the system that's causing the trauma in the first place. It never really challenges the rules of the game. But hold on, that is absolutely only one side of the story. Post-colonial theory did not just take those punches lying down. Oh no, it came back with its own powerful counterpunch, and it was aimed directly at Marxism's biggest blind spots and its most fundamental assumptions. And that post-colonial counterpunch, it's simple, but it's devastating. It's this. You simply cannot understand capitalism if you don't understand colonialism. They argue that what Marxism calls a universal story is, in reality, just a European story. It completely ignores how the brutal history of empire was the very fuel for capitalism's fire, right from the very beginning. Now, this gets to a really subtle but super important point. Thinkers like Etienne Balibar, they aren't just throwing out the whole idea of universal truths. No, what they're doing is asking a game-changing question. Who gets to define what's universal anyway? Their argument is that we have to uncouple these universal ideals from the very specific and often very violent history of Europe. But then, just as the academics were deep in debate, the world itself changed, and changed dramatically. A whole series of massive global events just kind of crashed the party. And suddenly, this abstract debate had a new and really urgent relevance. The real world, it turns out, has a way of cutting right through the theory. I mean, the 21st century hit hard and fast. You had the War on Terror, which suddenly made imperialism a massive headline issue again. That challenged any theory that was trying to ignore it. Then boom, the 2008 financial crash puts the failures of global capitalism on full display for the entire world to see. A really stark reminder of economic reality. And on top of that, you have the rise of all these new political movements, everything from the Arab Spring to Occupy, and they challenged everyone's assumptions about identity, power, and what it means to resist. And all of a sudden, the old playbooks just didn't seem to be working anymore. A pure Marxism that only focused on class, it really struggled to explain the cultural and religious fires that were driving these new conflicts. But at the same time, a purely cultural post-colonial theory, well, it felt kind of abstract and powerless when people were literally losing their homes to the brutal reality of austerity. So this challenge, it forced a change. It really pushed scholars to move beyond those old, tired battle lines of culture versus economy. It forced them towards more creative, more hybrid ways of thinking, ways that could actually grapple with this messy new reality. So what we see now is that, far from one side getting a clear win, the entire exchange has been, well, incredibly productive. The debate didn't die out, it evolved. It was actually revived by all these new challenges. And it started pointing the way beyond that old stalemate and towards something genuinely new. And the result? It's been this amazing explosion of new ideas. You have scholars now who are combining the powerful economic tools of Marxism with the absolutely crucial insights from postcolonial theory on things like race and empire. We're seeing totally new fields emerge, people analyzing things like postcolonial capitalism or uncovering these incredible, forgotten histories of labor from all over the world. And that brings us to a really crucial point. We're not talking about two monolithic sports teams here, right? Team Red versus Team Blue. Marxism and postcolonial theory, they are both incredibly diverse traditions, just full of their own internal debates. They're living, breathing ideas that are constantly responding to the world and to each other. Which, of course, leads us to the final and maybe the most important takeaway from this whole intellectual journey. After all the back and forth, all the arguments, all the synthesis, what really matters? Ultimately, I think the question from scholar Susie Tharu is the one that really cuts the deepest. We've learned from Marx that theories shouldn't just be about describing the world. They should be tools to change it, instruments to cut with, as she says. So the real question for any theory today isn't just, is it right? It's, what is it doing? What injustices is it actually cutting down? What kind of better future is it helping us build? That's the debate that's left. And you know what? It's a debate for all of us.